The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this January 20th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you can't listen in the evening, you can also listen to it at 11 a.m. Pacific Time on First Amendment Radio. Or go to my website at www.arcticbeacon.com. Okay, in the first half hour today, I am going to pull all the punches away and just say this very simply. The Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican is not a Christian organization. The higher level of the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, worships Lucifer. And I'm going to play a little clip that I played before, but just to bring the point home. This was invoked Pope Francis during an Easter service. They sang a little song before that, and you'll see that they are dedicating their service to the worship of Lucifer. It is in Latin, so I'll translate it and play in the background what they were singing. It's only about a minute long. After I do that, what I'd like to do is to go back to an old interview I did with someone called A. True Ott. I did this back in, I believe, 2006 or 7. And it also talks about child worshiping, Lucifer worship, etc. in the Mormon Church. Now, if I'm correct on this, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but Mormons believe that Lucifer and Jesus were brothers. Is that correct? Please, if I'm wrong, tell me. I'm just bringing it off the top of my head. Maybe A. True Ott, I've forgotten much of what we talked about specifically in that interview, and I'm going to play that for you right after I do this. I'm going to play the little invocation here showing you that the Vatican does, in fact, worship Lucifer. And they tell you in a very simple song right before they did this Easter service. Now, let me add this. You said that, I said that the Vatican is not a Christian organization. Well, I believe that's true. And I grew up thinking it was, because I was a Catholic. And I've since learned, starting when I worked in Rome for 7 years during the 1980s, that they weren't. Now, listen to some of these things before I play that little clip. The children, this is from Jeremiah 7:18. So the children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough, to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Roman Catholics believe that Mary, mother of Jesus, remained a virgin after the birth of Jesus, and was sinless all her life. She is worshipped in the Catholic Church as the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven. St. Bernard stated that she was crowned Queen of Heaven by God the Father, and that she currently sits upon a throne in heaven making intercession for Christians. Now, according to a website, nowtheendbegins.com, the Bible teaches otherwise. In the Bible, Mary was a sinner just like the rest of us. She said herself that she needed a Savior, and that was in Luke. And she even had to offer a sacrifice for her sins in Luke 2:24. Jesus was only her firstborn son, and according to Matthew 1:25, because she later had other children as well, and you can find that in Galatians as well, in Psalms, there's only one mediator between God and men, and it isn't Mary. The last time we hear from Mary in the Bible, she is praying with the disciples, not being prayed to by the disciples. The Bible never exalts Mary above anyone else, neither should we. Okay, so that's one reason why it's not a Christian organization, the placing of Mary as the Queen of Heaven, which is non-biblical. Also, recently I played on my show I read from an Italian article that was printed in Italy that we didn't get here in America that showed that just recently, apparently, Mother Mary appeared 3 times in Brazil, stating that ISIS was going to destroy the Vatican on March 23, 2016. Okay, now, is this the Jesuits at work? I think so. First of all, let's look at ISIS. Remember I told you that the obelisks in Washington, D.C., in the Vatican, in St. Peter's Square, and in London, as well as many other around the world, are basically worshiping Isis, a goddess, from Greek goddess. Now, we understand why they put it there, because that's what they worship. Sun gods, Lucifer, all of this kind of pagan worship goes on right there. And when they created terrorism, they used ISIS to stick it right in our face and tell us what they're doing and who really created it. Now, this is not going to get over very well in the mainstream, and you're not going to hear it from your presidential candidates because they work for the same organization. No matter what they say, you can bet on that. Now let's get back to Pope Francis invokes Lucifer at this Easter Vigil Mass. And I wanted to play this really quickly to show you that. Then we're going to get to that Truot interview that I did. That was back in 2006. So let's do that right now. And I'm going to read to you what the opening of this service, which is in Latin, says in English. Lucifer finds mankind. I say, O Lucifer, who will never be defeated, rest is our son. Be our Christ is our son. Or Christ is your son. That's exactly what they say. So they say at the end, I say, O Lucifer, who will never be defeated, Christ is your son. I was having a little trouble reading that, but that's basically just a little bit. I played about a 3-minute clip of what they go on to say, but that's really in a nutshell what happened before the Easter service. They worship Lucifer, they say it in Latin, and end of story. So are there other organizations created? We did a whole bunch of stories, and in fact A. Truot said that Vatican was very instrumental in creating Mormonism. And let's see what Truot really had to say back in 2006 about the Mormon Church. And I'll explain in this interview who he is.
One's going to argue this. I mean, when you're in school, and you can remember when you were in grade school and high school and even in college, you were encouraged to ask questions because the only way that you really learn is by asking questions. It's not by coming to a conclusion before you ask the questions. It's asking the questions. And going back to what I'm saying, it has this, what can I say? There are a million questions still to be answered as we take this journey in life. And I doubt very much if we'll ever run out of them if we really, really want to get at the truth. And so I'm at this point right now where I'm asking a lot of questions about the Jesuit order. And the reason I am is because I've had a number of guests who say they aren't what they appear to be, and that they are involved in the New World Order, and they are involved in it at a very high level all over the world. And so I want to find out. So I'm going to start at the top, trying to interview the Black Pope and ask him first about whether he likes that name or not. I know why they gave it to him, because he always wears a black hat. But anyway, I want to ask him that. And then I want to ask him about all these accusations, and let's see what he has to say. Now, if he's not, I know he's a very powerful man, and he may be busy, but I will talk with his assistant, there's one assistant in the United States, I found out, and I will talk to him. I don't want to talk to one of the 10 provincials heads in our country. I want to talk to his assistant. I mean, I'll go that low. And let's see if I can get that done. Well, I've started today with my quest. I started in Cali. I figured there's so many provinces. I started in one in Chicago because that's where I was born. That's where I was raised as a Catholic, and that's where I went to school. In high school and grade school, I went to St. John Brebeuf grade school for 8 years, and then I went 4 years to Notre Dame High School. And I feel, being born a Catholic, I have a right to know about my faith. And I'm going to ask these people about these accusations, and I don't think anybody can argue that. So that's what I'm in the process of trying to do, along with a whole bunch of other things. But let me tell you these two numbers before I get to my guest, A. Truat, who has an incredible story also regarding his religion, the LDS Church, and also a little Jesuit connection there, so that'll be interesting. But let me do this. There's two numbers, and I'm getting this right off of the Jesuit order. One thing funny here is they put the number 3, and they say the religious vows that Jesuits commit themselves to observe: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, I have to ask a question there to Peter Hans Kolbenbach. How do they do this poverty thing when they own 28 major universities in America? And if you check to their bank holdings, and if you check at their land ownership holdings all over the world, it's quite considerable. I wonder how that falls into the poverty level. That's just a question. The chastity and obedience, we can get to it another time, but I'm curious about the poverty commitment they make. Okay, then we go to number 93, they put. The number of Jesuit provinces, along with 13 independent regions that make up the basic organizational unit of the Society of Jesus. Each province is headed by a provincial superior who is appointed by and reports directly to the Society's general superior. Jesuit provinces are grouped into 11, that number 11, regional assistancies with an assistant to Father General in Rome. That Father General being the Black Pope. Some people say it's the real Pope and gives the orders to the White Pope, which is the Pope in the Vatican. So we're going to ask him that too. I want to find out if that's true. At least try to find out. So I said I talked to his assistant. There's one here in the States. Now, one last number here, and then I'm going to get to my guest. The number of general superiors, this is 29, this is the number they put on their website, 29. The number of general superiors in the history of the society. Now we're talking about Peter Hans Kolbenbach. He's the 29th. Beginning with its founder, St. Ignatius Loyola. The general superior lives in Rome and is immediately accountable to the Pope. Now, I heard it's the other way around, but we'll find out. Father Peter Hans Kolbenbach is the Jesuit general now, Black Pope. A Dutch Jesuit who worked for 25 years in the Middle East. Isn't that interesting? He has a lot of Middle East experience. Was elected the 29th Jesuit general in September 1983. They're usually, and I'm paraphrasing here, they're usually in for life. However, he announced he is leaving his post next, I think in a year or two. In 1983, he was put in as Jesuit general by Jesuit delegates to the 33rd General Congregation from all the society's provinces and vice provinces. The General Superior is elected to serve without limit on his term of office. And with that, let me go to A. Truat and give you a little bit of an introduction here. A. Truat has come forward. He's been on our show before, and I wanted to bring him back because there's some interesting things. He's been researching heavily the bird flu scare and talking to a number of people, experts in this field. And True also has some interest in health, and he'll explain that, health care and other things that he does. We never did get into that, so I wanted to get into that aspect with him. And I also wanted to get into this aspect about the LDS Church and this kind of hush-hush thing. Anytime you mention anything negative about them, people get so uptight, and I don't understand why. I mean, we're all just searching for the truth. Remember back to when we were kids. You got to ask questions, even if they're hard questions. And that's what I want to do with True. And he's always trying to answer them as honest as he can from his personal experience of being excommunicated from the church, and also being harassed and threatened to death, and also from people he has talked to that talk about some corruption in the hierarchy of his church, as we've talked about the corruption in the hierarchy of the Vatican. True, how are you today?
Ben, Greg, thank you so much.
And I'm doing this kind of quest to talk to some of these Jesuits only because I want to find out the truth, because nobody ever does. I mean, nobody ever goes and talks to them. So I want to try to do that as a journalist and also as a Catholic. I mean, I spent 12 years in school, and I grew up as a Catholic, and I wanted to get the straight scoop, I guess, from the horse's mouth. But tell me, about this Jesuit connection. I want to go back and start way back in some of the things you've uncovered in your research. And let me tell you, you do some incredible research that is overlooked by a lot of people. But where did the Jesuits come into the first time they come into the picture with the LDS Church that you found out?
Well, again, it goes back to I'm a history buff. Utah history is always been a great hobby of mine, specifically looking at my maternal family line, which goes back to Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, the very origins of the church itself. My maternal grandfather, great-grandfather, was actually the first territorial marshal of Utah. His name was Joseph Leland Haywood. And as such, as being the first territorial marshal, he was also the U.S. postmaster. He was trained, received that post, actually went back to, this is very significant, by the way, went back to Boston, Massachusetts, and was there put into the highest order of Freemasonry, became a Master Mason in just a few days, and then came back to Utah and received his entitlement as postmaster and territorial marshal. Okay. In his notes and papers, which he kept a prodigious amount of, there was references and messages, transcripts, pouches being sent to a Jesuit general named Peter de Smet. This was done correspondence between Brigham Young and Peter de Smet. Now, if you look at the history of Salt Lake City, Utah, you'll find that the Catholic influence is almost on a par with the Mormon influence. I always found that to be somewhat strange. Mm-hmm. Here it's not readily apparent. You have to dig and find that, and then you do find that to be true. You start scratching your head and wanting to ask questions. And I applaud you trying to get a hold of Mr. Hans Kolvenbach.
Well, he's a priest.
I'll tell you something. If you do succeed, and I say yes,
I'm gonna try.
That'll be probably the best interview on free radio the world's ever seen, and I congratulate you for efforts to try to do that.
Well, it doesn't, heck, I interviewed Muhammad Ali one time for 4 hours and spent a day with him. I looked at, if I could interview Muhammad Ali, come on, Peter Hans Kolvenbach's a priest.
He's a man, too.
Yeah, and why can't you talk to a priest? What's there to hide?
Why don't you ask him a couple questions for me? Ask him about Peter de Smet's liaison with Brigham Young. Ask him if he knows anything about that and would like to comment on the Jesuits' continuing relationship with the Mormon leaders. Okay. And ask him what IHS, the Jesuit symbol, in Latin really means under this sign, conquer, and specifically, who are they trying to conquer? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'd like to know that. I'd also like to know what the 3 nails are in their sign. Okay. Okay.
I'm gonna, what I'm doing?
Of the nails.
I'm also now getting people to write down questions for me because I want to be informed. And there are many people out there like you and Eric Phelps and a number of other people that have been researching this issue. And I really want to get questions from you guys, along with people that may feel differently. And ask him questions that are, may clear up some things, or at least get to the bottom of from his point of view. So I may be asking you to provide some. But go ahead, get back to this.
Just like me, I understand how important questioning is, and questioning in the Mormon Church, at least, is equivalent to apostasy. We'll get out and into that after the break.
Okay, real good. I'm with H. Ruat. We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Okay, I took a break back in 2006, and now we're back here in 2016. And before I get back to this interview, let me say this, that I hope the volume's okay. It's a little low. I couldn't get it up any higher, but I'm sure you'll be able to hear. If so, adjust it on your computer. But I never did accomplish getting a hold of Father Hans Kolvenbach or his assistant, although I did talk to some provincials and got some really interesting answers. I can go over those in another show. But perhaps I should try again to get a hold of the new Jesuit general. And if you did hear what I said, Kolvenbach was an expert in the Middle East. And I think that's why he resigned. It's very unusual for a Jesuit general to resign, just as it was unusual right around the same time for the Pope to resign. And I think Kolvenbach ended up going to the Middle East, and he's helping that Father Del Oglio, getting that terrorist organization in order and working behind the scenes there. So let's get back to A Truat in 2006, talking about the Jesuit connection to the Mormon Church.
Okay, questions. There's so many to be answered yet. And Truat, you're always asking good questions that need to be answered, because I think we need to uncover really the truth about what's happening in our world right now. And I think part of your investigations are getting to the bottom of certain things. Talk about what that last statement you get kind of disturbed me when you said your church, or where you're from, doesn't encourage this kind of inquisitiveness when it comes to the very foundations of what they tell you to believe.
Well, it mirrors just exactly what you said in the earlier your earlier statements, Greg. The three foundations of the Jesuit order, one of them which is obedience, and obedience is stressed just as strongly, if not more so, in the Mormon structure. Okay, that's what. You know, as a missionary, young missionaries going off, they're just so brainwashed into obedience. You must obey to get the Spirit of God with you. Obedience is key. In fact, I'll never forget when I went into the Salt Lake Mission home under Mission President Byrd there in Salt Lake. His favorite scripture, he had us all underline and forever commit to memory, is the scripture we're referring of Christ. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And the context of that is, of course, you will suffer immensely if you are not obedient. So obedience is key foundation of the gospel. In fact, giving, the Mormon gospel says to give up your free will is the ultimate sacrifice. In fact, that was even taught in a general conference address just a few years ago. I have it right here in front of me. That to sacrifice one's free agency, free will.
I need to get back to this Jesuit connection real quick. 4 minutes before the break that you uncovered, which I found fascinating, how you found them involved in the formation of your church.
Do I have complete and total evidence of that? No. Again, it's just passing references to the fact that he was a courier. My ancestor was a courier for his very high-level messages between Brigham Young and this Peter De Smet. Do I know what was in those messages? Of course I don't. That's very highly classified information. But just the fact that there was, we're talking Pioneer, Utah, Greg. We're talking 1850s, okay?
What about that one Jesuit you met? Remember that story?
Yes.
That brings it back to the roots, I think. And that was an interesting story. Tell me about that.
He refused to totally elaborate, but there was without a doubt, there's a definite link to the Book of Mormon's origins at the Jesuit sequence.
Okay, we're going to take a break here in 2016 now. Boy, there's a lot of breaks when you try to get these old shows back. But I think it's worthwhile information, and we're going to continue in the second half hour with this Mormon Jesuit connection. And A. Truat had talked to a Jesuit priest, and it's a very interesting conversation. And let's get to that in the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. We'll be back in 3 minutes after these short messages.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, and I want to continue with this interview I did, and this was back in 2006, April 17th, with A. Truott, a blue blood Mormon, excommunicated, harassed, and threatened with death for asking sensitive questions about the LDS Church, such as, does satanic worshiping go on behind the veil of secrecy in the Mormon temple in Utah? Well, he found out some startling information that led to his excommunication, and it's an amazing story. So let's listen to this interview again as I pick it up here back in 2006 with A. Truott.
So obedience is key foundation of the gospel. In fact, giving the Mormon gospel says to give up your free will is the ultimate sacrifice. In fact, that was even taught in a general conference address just a few years ago. I have it right here in front of me. That to sacrifice one's free agency, free will.
I need to get back to this Jesuit connection real quick, 4 minutes before the break, that you uncovered, which I found fascinating, how you found them involved in the formation of your church.
Do I have complete and total evidence of that? No. Again, it's just passing references to the fact that he was a courier. My ancestor was a courier for his very high-level messages between Brigham Young and this Peter De Smet. Do I know what was in those messages? Of course I don't. That's very highly classified information. But just the fact that there was, we're talking Pioneer, Utah, Greg. We're talking 1850s, okay?
What about that one Jesuit you met? Remember that story?
Yes.
That brings it back to the roots, I think, and that was an interesting story. Tell me about that.
He refused to totally elaborate, but there was without a doubt, there's a definite link to the Book of Mormon's origins and the Jesuit secrets. Okay.
Okay.
Now he did not elaborate, but he surely knew a lot about it.
And there was something of a book he had that he misplaced or something you told me.
Yeah, it goes back to the link between the Solomon Spaulding manuscript that was lost. It was actually called Manuscript Found. The story, briefly, is that Spaulding evidently found this Latin manuscript along the banks of the Ohio River in Kirtland, Ohio. And on being not trained in Latin, he was kind of at a loss to know what it was until one Sidney Rigdon, a learned school teacher, came to the Kirtland area and was able to help him with the translation, okay? So that is the story as told to me by a Jesuit priest in Syracuse, New York in 1979.
Interesting.
And so, I had to take it at face value. I think this fellow he claimed to be the actual historian of the Jesuit order in the province, New York City. Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. This connection, of course, it's hard to make sometimes. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, you've made some allegations, basically how you have nothing against the Mormon faith or the people. You basically are suggesting and saying through research that the hierarchy is corrupt. And basically, you have been excommunicated for your statements. You also stated that...
Well, I shouldn't. That's an incorrect statement.
Okay, go ahead.
Not for my statements, for my questioning.
Okay.
Okay?
For your questioning.
My questioning. I asked some very, very hard questions. And sometimes the answers to those questions is done by the actions.
Now, what kind of questions were you asking that led to it?
It all began, there's nobody more blue blood in the Mormon faith than True Odd. And you're talking about the prototypical Mormon boy, okay? Couldn't be any more prototypical than I was. In the early part of 1990, I was actually was in Mormon terminology set apart to be a temple, LDS temple ordinance worker, okay? I'm a young man still. I'm in my 30s, and that's kind of unusual. Mm-hmm. But to do that, you have to go in and under the watchful eye of the temple presidency, you're given these manuscripts to study and learn word for word, verbatim. They cannot even have a single A or a difference, okay? It has to be complete and total.
All right, listen, let's pick up with that right after this break. I'm talking to A. Truott, and we will be back in 3 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to pick up this interview I did back in 2006 with A. Truott. Here we go.
Pick up where you left off. We're talking about the questions that led to your excommunications.
Yeah, it was very simple. Here I am, me and my sweetheart, my wife, we're learning and passing off this temple nomenclature, these paragraphs word for word, and suddenly they're changed, and we're talking about dramatic changes, significant, at least significant to me, parts that we had just passed were suddenly not relevant. Okay? Now, logic, in my mind, demands an answer to that, because these things we were studying our mind was programmed to believe they were most sacred, okay? Not semi-sacred, not partially sacred, most sacred. Now, logic then demands, if things that are most sacred for a century are suddenly changed, shouldn't there be a reason for that?
For example?
For example, why not ask the deeper spiritual reasons for the changes, which I did to the temple presidency. This is back in 1991, Greg.
Okay.
And immediately, I realized I was in trouble. I was told, quote, "You, sir, are on the high road to apostasy for daring to even ask such questions." Because obviously, by asking the questions, you do not have unblinding obedience to the prophet that at that time was Ezra Taft Benson. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, wow. So right then, you're told there is no room for questioning if you want to be a Mormon in good standing. So you know what I did? I put it on the shelf. Okay? I said, I want to be a good Mormon in good standing more than anything else. I'm sorry. You see, there comes the guilt trip. They make you think the problem is with you if you question.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And, folks, that is satanic. That is the domain of Lucifer, not of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, at least the Christ that I've been taught, the New Testament teaches us what? That Christ said, ask. Ask all things. And ask is actually an acronym for ask, A, seek, S, and K, knock. Ask, seek, and knock. What is wrong with asking questions? Greg, you hit the nail on the head. Only by questioning can we even learn.
Right, and I mean, it's amazing when you get into these this subject matter. It gets so clouded, and even the church tries to hide everything. I mean, if you ask hard questions about the things that you uncover, the history of looking at the Jesuit order, and things that are, for example, let me give you an example of a question that needs to be asked. Now, in 1969, the Jesuits were expelled from Iraq. Okay? Now, not many people know about this, and I'd like to ask Peter Hans Kolvenbach this. They were expelled from Iraq, okay?
I bet they're back in now.
Now, listen, now 69. Now, I want to know why they're a Catholic order. Now, some people may say, well, you know, it was a religious thing against Muslim extremists and all this stuff, and it was the Muslims that did it. But let's see what happened afterwards. I want to find out why there was a number, and this is documented, and I will get the dates and everything for you, and the planes and the diplomats that went down in strange airplane crashes after that. Some leaders of Iraq were then killed in plane crashes that were never, mysterious crashes like we see in our country a lot of times. Well, right after that, guess who took power? Saddam Hussein.
CIA plant.
Right. Now, what's his connection to this? And why, what happened? What's the story behind that? I'd really like to find out why the Jesuits were expelled from most every country.
You will also find during that same time frame when Saddam was installed, that was the reign of George Herbert Walker Bush as CIA chief.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah. Now, the connection, now there are people, I'm not saying this, I'm talking to researchers that I've talked to, are saying that in the Jesuit order, they don't worship God, they worship Lucifer, and they're deceivers. And so I want to ask that question. But, I mean, it's a question you can ask. I mean, we're brought up in the Catholic faith to question Lucifer, to question the devil. They bring the devil into our vocabulary to begin with. So now that the word, I hear from people that they are devil worshippers, I want to find out from them what these, if these allegations, according to them, are true, at least.
Well, in the defense of Brother Kolvenbach,
right,
and Brother Hinckley, and the rest of them, Lucifer is the god of light. He's the Illuminati head. I mean, he doesn't appear as a cloven hoof, evil person.
No.
Okay, and so in their defense, they likely, and again, this is true off opinion, believe they're doing this to benefit the human race. Okay? But I maintain that complete and total bovine obedience does not does not benefit the human race in any way, shape, or form.
Right, and so we jump over to the LDS Church, and I mean, why not talk about it openly? I mean, if there's accusations that the hierarchy of the Church has been corrupted, and they're not, of course, adhering to poverty, the religious vows that they, at least the Jesuits say they adhere to. I mean, let's talk about this corruption. Let's talk about you've talked to people in your church who have given you statements that satanic worshiping goes on in the LDS Church. Now, after people read my story about you on my website, www.arcticbeacon.com, I got a number of emails. I should have read some. I think I did read a couple from people in Utah who just blatantly called me crazy. Blatantly called me a Mormon hater, every other word under the sun, and then of course I had other people who were saying that one, we should question this and get to the bottom of it because there are people coming forward with this information. So please tell people, first of all, that you are not making this statement just out of hatred from your church for them.
I have absolutely no hatred for the church. I feel wronged by them. I feel duped by them. I feel some anger there. Of course, that's human nature. But I try to follow Jesus Christ's teachings as the best that I can. That means forgive and go on. Now, let's define, Greg, for the listeners, what satanic ritual is. Let's just give it a definition, okay? Would it not be something that empowers Satan? Let's assume that even Satan is a real being.
Okay.
I personally think that as the adversary, he is very real.
Okay.
So anything that has a ceremony in which innocent people are deceived into following him could be thus classified as a satanic ritual.
Exactly.
From a very broad definition. Okay?
Okay.
So that said, I would submit that the Mormon temple endowment, by that very definition, is in fact a satanic ritual.
Okay.
Okay. Now you're not supposed to talk about this. You're given, you take vows of secrecy, and they're actually blood oaths, at least prior to 1990, that you would have your throat cut, your chest cut open, your bowels cut open if you were to give any part of this publicly.
That's what you had to do?
That's what we had to do, absolutely. And in 1990, that was taken out. That was one of those most sacred changes, you see, that I had questions about.
Mm-hmm.
So today's new Mormon initiate does not have to take those blood oaths, but they're still given very strong cautions of how important secrecy is. Now, the very first part of the Mormon endowment, you're introduced to Satan.
Okay.
Okay. In that first part, you're given some very key information. You're shown that, Satan has what's called an apron on, Greg.
Okay.
And the actor that portrays Eve...
I'm sure it's not my ex-wife, but go on.
The actor that portrays Eve and partakes of the forbidden fruit as being, because Satan deceives her to do so, looks at Satan and says, "What is that apron you have on?" And the answer is given. It is the emblem of my priesthoods and power. Eve then asks, "Priesthoods?" And very emphatically, Lucifer responds, "Yes, priesthoods."
Okay.
So right there we're given some very key information. Now, the Mormon hierarchy will get upset at this, but they're very upset about this, but it's the truth, Greg.
Now, did you
5 minutes later, in the ceremony, every man and woman, every initiate is clothed in what's just been described as Lucifer's emblem.
Okay.
Okay. So, by the very definition, then, that's a satanic ritual.
So
because it empowers Satan by clothing people in his emblem. Now that's just logic, and that's just cut and dried. So to say that there's hidden Satan worshiping going on a higher level? Doesn't that logically flow that if Satan worshiping is done on an open, overt level, would it not be logical then to assume that even higher rituals such as human sacrifice, other blood rituals could be done on a covert level? I would say the logic demands the question to be asked at the very least.
Right. Now, I got an email, too, when you had mentioned that you talked to a number of people who said that they've experienced or known of satanic worshiping going on in the temple in Utah. I got an email from someone who said he worked there, and he's covered every last inch of that place. Somehow he had access, he said to me, and I can't remember exactly what position he held, and that by no way, shape, or form is there anything remotely used in that temple as for satanic worshiping. What would you respond to that from people you've talked to?
Well, there are, to say that, I would have to see his credentials. Was he a security guard? Was he this or that?
Yeah, I apologize for not having it.
Yeah, and so to respond to that, I would have to say, again, is it overt or covert? I'm here to tell you that I too have other eyewitnesses that the Salt Lake area is literally honeycombed with underground subterranean tunnels. Now, there are, I myself have been, this is back in the 80s, okay, the old Hotel Utah, which is now the Joseph Smith Memorial Building. I was staying there and went to a wedding ceremony in the temple, and we went underground into a temple, to the temple from the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, okay? And that was just one very overt tunnel, but I'm here to tell you there could easily have been dozens of other tunnels honeycombing around there that I surely wouldn't have access to, nor I would say any security guard would. For what reason? Unless he's part of the hierarchical secret, nobody's going to know that. To have somebody come out and say that there's no such thing, again, stresses logic to the.
Now, generally, how and why is your church hierarchy been corrupted from your research?
I believed at first when I began to ask the questions, Greg, I thought that it had been an infiltration at around the time of Heber J. Grant. I was holding to the premise, as I come now to find a mistaken belief, that Joseph Smith was divine, Brigham Young was also divine, etc., etc. I've come to the full realization, full circle now, that it all began with Joseph Smith. And I show this expose in my book, Free at Last. Joseph Smith, by the church's own admission, okay, at age 6.5, underwent extreme trauma, emotionally and psychologically, with a typhus infestation, okay. His leg became so totally infected that he, over a period of 6 months, had numerous operations where live bone was taken out, Greg. The trauma must have been extreme, without anesthesia. And if you understand the Operation Paperclip, the experiments done by the Nazis to create trauma-based mind control, it's a classic example of how to do so. And here's a young lad, 6.5 years old, innocent, yes, but absolutely traumatized to the point of dissociation. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that in order to survive that trauma, he had to dissociate, become a multiple personality. And then at what point did his handlers, his Illuminati cultic handlers enter the picture? I've found and shown in my book and research that happened with a gentleman named Lumen Walters. Jesuit connection, absolutely. Lumen Walters was expelled from France, where he was a student of Anton Mesmer and a charter member of Francis Fratres Lucis, the Brotherhood of Lucifer. All right? Okay. Joseph Smith, this Lumen Walters became Joseph Smith's bosom friend and companion to his formative years. Now, I challenge people listening to this that don't want to believe what they're hearing to go to the first vision story. This is in the Pearl of Great paid price in the writings of Joseph Smith himself in 1838. In his own words, Joseph Smith describes at age 14 being overcome by a complete dark entity, a dark force, just prior to his supposed first vision. Now, can Lucifer appear after an occultic paralyzation of the senses as an angel of light, a being of light to deceive? Absolutely. Historically, that's very valid. And I maintain that's exactly what happened. Joseph Smith is indeed the prophet of God. Absolutely. That did happen. I maintain that. My premise now, though, is that was none other than Lucifer God. And the rest of the story follows along with the evidence. It's literally overwhelming evidence, Greg, to show that's exactly what happened. And the restoration of the priesthood is, in fact, the priesthood of Lucifer, Melchizedek's priesthood.
After this break, let's get into this. I mean, when you're asking these questions, if they had nothing to hide, why did they come after you so much?
Exactly. That is the answer, that it is valid.
Right. So we'll get back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Final segment for True Ops. And True, I wanted to mention, why do you think they came down so hard on you? Tell the people, we only have a few minutes and we didn't get into really what I wanted to get into, but that's we'll talk another time on the bird flu. But tell us, just in a minute or so before, we have maybe 5 minutes, but just to briefly tell us the kind of harassment you went under after trying to get these questions answered.
Well, I was basically just told that I need to resign my membership or face excommunication. Now, what kind of a choice is that? You know, as the rights guaranteed me under the Constitution and Bill of Rights, don't we have the rights as good citizens to question our leaders?
Well, anyway, we're all out of time, and I'll get back tomorrow and give you a rundown of what happened to him. And there are some really strong connections here between the formation of this church and the Jesuit order, and also the writing of the who actually did write the Book of Mormon. I think the Jesuits had a hand in that, and Truott agrees as well. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Have a good night.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.